Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah. Here we're holding Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel. Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel. And Yes Hashem, today we will be learning Daf Kuf Amid Aleph. Wow, very exciting. We're already up to Kuf Amid Aleph in Chelik Gimel. Okay, our learning should be a schus. For Achenu Beis Yisrael, Hanasunim Batzar Bashivya, Ha'imdim Bein Bayamu Bein Bayabasha, Hamakim Yerachem Alehem V'Yitziam Yitzar L'Rvacha, Me'afela La'oiro Mishibur L'Geula Hashta B'Gala V'Zman Kariv, V'Neimar Armein. Our learning should be a schus for Fu Shalema, from Moshe Meir ben Esther Fradel, Yitzchak ben Sion ben Dusha, Dvar Bashashabina, Rivka Bashiraleh, Chavadasa Bas Serel. Our learning should be a schus for Yonasan ben Michal and Yoel ben Michal. The Rebbeinu Shalom should watch over them together with all of our other brothers and sisters that find themselves in a harm way, b'chol makayim shehem. So we're continuing to learn Hilchos Shabbos. We pick up today on Tzadik Tes Amid Beis, Siman Shin Vav Sif Yud Beis, 2 lines off the bottom in the Shulchan Aruch. We're continuing to discuss the halachas of Mimtzai Cheptzecha V'Daber Davar, things that are appropriate to be involved in on Shabbos and things that you are not allowed to be involved in on Shabbos, even if they do not involve the performance of actual Meleches Isser, but they're not Shabbos appropriate, and therefore they are Usser because of Mimtzai Chefzecha V'Daber Davar. Says the Mechaber, Mutter Lahachriz B'Shabbos Al Aveda. You're allowed to call out a lost object on Shabbos. This means that if somebody lost something on Shabbos, he's allowed to go make an announcement and say, I lost a briefcase. If somebody might know where it is, please come to me. I lost my tefillin. I left my tefillin in a car service. If anybody has the location of my tefillin, please let me know. Certainly, if you are the finder of an Aveda, certainly you're allowed to call out an Aveda, and you're allowed to say, I found a pair of tefillin. If it belongs to you, please come to me. That case is less of a chiddush. The reason this is mutter, says the Mechaber, well, he doesn't say it, but it's obvious. The reason this is mutter is because Hashavas Aveda is a mitzvah. So when you find a lost object, you have a mitzvah. It's incumbent upon you to go ahead and do whatever you need to do to return it. So when you make the hachraza, when you call out, I found a lost object, you're definitely doing something which is a mitzvah. Now, you might have thought that there's an aspect of Mimtzai Chefzecha V'Daber Davar over here. In other words, what is this? You're calling out something to give it to somebody. It sounds a little bit, it feels a little bit like Mekachu Memkar announcing announcing inventory. There's a better word. Merchandise. You're calling out merchandise on Shabbos, but this is not a problem because this is certainly not Chefzecha, it's Cheftzei Shamayim. Now, the bigger chiddush is that if you're not the finder, if you're the one who lost something, now you would say to yourself, if I lost something, I am not fulfilling the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda when I call it out, right? I'm trying to get my object back. I lost something, I took a hit, I want to call it out so that I should get my lost item back. That's not Hashavas Aveda. You're not doing Hashavas Aveda. The one who returns the Aveda is doing Hashavas Aveda. So are you allowed to call out that you lost something on Shabbos? That sounds much more like Mimtzai Chefzecha V'Daber Davar. You're pursuing your own personal need to get your merchandise back. Now, I used the example of tefillin, so tefillin sounds very mitzvah-oriented, but what if it's not tefillin, right? I lost an attaché case with very important papers in it. I do real estate, and I had 7 contracts inside that briefcase. If anybody knows where the briefcase is, please return it to me. That shmecks very much of Mimtzai Chefzecha V'Daber Davar. Still in all, it's still mutter, because it's still considered a mitzvah, and the Mishnah Berurah will discuss why. Continues the Mechaber, this is true, afilu hi davar she'asar l'taltaloi. Even if you're calling out the loss of something that will not be able to be returned to you today. Why? Because it's muktzah. So if you call out and you say, I lost a box, full of electronics, I'm a salesman, and I lost a box full of electronics. The person who found it can't return it to you on Shabbos. It's muktzah. So are you allowed to call it out? The answer is yes. Even though it can't be returned to you on Shabbos, you're still allowed to call it out. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Oiskat Memches al Aveda, you're allowed to call out an Aveda, Shemisha Yedea B'Yava V'Yagid. You, the one who lost the Aveda, is allowed to make this acharaza, is allowed to make this announcement that anybody who knows where the lost item is, anybody who has any information about the lost object, should please come tell me. The Hashavas Aveda mitzvah, because the starting point over here is that Hashavas Aveda is a mitzvah seidaraisa. V'loimar l'misha yedea mimena sheyeshivena, and to tell somebody who found the Aveda who the owner is, so that he might be able to return it. Gamzehu b'chlal cheftzei shamayim. That's still cheftzei shamayim, right? Ruvain found the box full of electronics. The Rabbeinu Shalom wants Ruvain to be able to return it. So for you to call out and say, I'm the one who lost it, please return it to me, that facilitates Ruvain's ability to be Mekayim the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda and return it to you. So that hacharaza is itself cheftzei shamayim v'shari, and it's mutter. Continues the Mishnah Berurah, v'nagu lahachriz gam al avedas ein Yehudi. The minig is that we also call out when you find a lost object that belonged to an ein Yehudi, mipnei darkei shalom, in order to keep peace with our einam Yehudim neighbors. Strictly speaking, to call out the Aveda of an Ein Yehudi, you're not mechuyev on Hashavas Aveda to an Ein Yehudi. Indeed, there are those that suggest that Hashavas Aveda to an Ein Yehudi could actually be an Isser. However, certainly if it's going to make a Kiddushem Shamayim, it's definitely mutter and advisable to return the Aveda of a Nachri. Also, if there's a risk that by not returning the Aveda of a Nachri, it might cause Ava, it might increase hatred, then certainly you have to return it. The minig, says the Mishnah Berurah, is to call out the Aveda of a Nachri even on Shabbos. Certainly, if there's any aspect of sakana, of anybody coming to danger over here, it is certainly mutter. Right? To who I did the mutter. Al Gineva. Not only are you allowed to call out an Aveda on Shabbos, you're also allowed to call out a Gneva. So if somebody, chas v'sholem, his house was robbed on Shabbos, you could call out, listen, somebody broke into my house last night and stole, a candelabra. Anybody who has any information, please let me know. That also would be mutter on Shabbos. The Mechaber said this is mutter even if the lost object is a dvar muktzah, and therefore it cannot be returned to you on Shabbos. Even if the one who found it cannot return it on Shabbos because it's muktzah, so now the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda is not going to be accomplished on Shabbos. So do we still say it's mutter for you to call out your loss in order to facilitate the Hashavas Aveda? The Hashavas Aveda is not going to happen on Shabbos. I feel lahachi mutter, it's still mutter. Kedei lefarsem ha'inyan b'Shabbos zman shehu zman knufya l'rabim. It's still a mitzvah, because when do you have the opportunity to call out the Aveda in a tzibur, in such a public setting? That's Shabbos, when everybody comes to shul, Shabbos morning, you have a knufya, you have a gathering of the tzibur. That's the best time to call out the Aveda and facilitate the Hashavas Aveda, and therefore it is mutter, even if the Aveda is muktzah and will not be able to be returned on Shabbos. Haggah, says the Ramah, bottom line in the Shulchan Aruch. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol niyeh b'dvaro. Says the Ramah, Haggah. Umutter lahatir chermei tzibur b'Shabbos. The tzibur is allowed to be matir. They're allowed to release a cherem that was made for the tzibur on Shabbos. Okay, background. Most of us are familiar with what a neder is. A neder is a vow. Somebody made a neder. So let's say somebody made a neder. He wants to go on a diet. So he made a neder that he's not going to eat any chocolate. Horror of horrors. And now he wants to be matir neder. So we know that there is a method that Chazal tell us how you can become released from your neder. You go to a chacham, and a chacham can perform hataras nedarim. He could release you from your vow. I'm not going to go into Hilchas Nedarim right now, but you need either you need a Pesach, you need a Charata, you need an opening where you could explain to the Talmid Chacham, I never would have made the neder if I would have known X, Y, Z. So you have to provide the Chacham with a Pesach, a Charata, a reason why you regret making the neder, a reason why you would have never made the neder if you would have known something that you just found out. And then the Talmid Chacham could release you from your neder. He could perform Hataras Nedarim. You're not allowed to be matir neder on Shabbos. So you made a neder and you want to get out of it. A chacham cannot be matir neder on Shabbos. There are various reasons that the Rishonim give for this. One is that it looks like being done as hadin. Being matir neder is something that a Talmid Chacham does. It looks a little bit like a Ma'aseh Bezdin. It looks like it falls under the rubric of judgment on Shabbos. And you're not allowed to perform din on Shabbos. Why are you not allowed to sit in din on Shabbos? A gzeira that you might come to kaisiv, right? Part and parcel of judgment and din is the writing of different types of documents, etc., etc. So we're afraid that being done din might come to kaisiv, therefore it's usher on Shabbos, and therefore Hataras Nedarim is usher on Shabbos. Now, what does this have to do with what we're speaking about here? We're speaking about charamim. What does this mean? So there are times when the tzibur will announce a cherem on anybody who does X, Y, Z. So let's say there's a tzibur, there's a town, and the rabbanim in the town decided that the people in the town are acting too leniently or they're acting too inappropriately in a certain area. So they may get together and they may announce a cherem. They may say, anybody who does X, Y, Z, anybody who does this thing that we feel we have to strengthen the tzibur in, anybody who does this is going to be put in cherem. They're going to be excommunicated. When somebody's put in cherem, you're not allowed to stand in his dalet amis, you're not allowed to talk to him, he's not allowed to cut his hair. There's all sorts of halachas that come in when somebody is really in cherem. So there are times that the tzibur will pass a decree, and they'll say anybody who does X, Y, Z is hereby in cherem. That's called charmei tzibur, a cherem that was placed on the public. Now, there are times when the time has come where it's time to release that cherem. So let's say they made a certain cherem, and Baruch Hashem, things improved, and now the tzibur is properly being nizar in that area. So now they decide we don't need the cherem anymore. So now you want to make an announcement. We're nullifying that cherem. It's no longer a problem. You're allowed to be matir chermei tzibur on Shabbos. So even though you're not allowed to be matir neder on Shabbos, because being matir neder is like being done dinim on Shabbos, which you're not allowed to do, gzeira mishum kaisiv, being matir cherem is a little bit like being matir neder. So you would think the same way you can't be matir neder, you can't be matir cherem. Comes along the Ramah to tell me you're allowed to be matir chermei tzibur on Shabbos. And continues the Ramah, going to the top of Kuf Amud Aleph, this is true afal pi she'einu l'tzara Shabbos, even if it has nothing to do with Shabbos. So in other words, sometimes there could be chermei tzibur that are negeya to Hilchas Shabbos. Maybe the Rabbanim in the town see that people aren't being nizar properly in a certain area of Hilchas Shabbos. Maybe they see people going outside to Rishus Harabim wearing things that they're really not allowed to wear on Shabbos because of the Isurim of Haitzah, or they see other things that have to do with Hilchas Shabbos that people aren't being nizar in. So they go ahead and they tried to teach the people, they tried to cajole the people, it wasn't successful, so they made a cherem. Anybody who does this on Shabbos is going to be put in cherem. Now that's the geya to Hilchas Shabbos. Now, Baruch Hashem, everybody's comporting themselves properly. Now it's time to be matir the cherem. You might think the same way you're not allowed to be matir neder on Shabbos, you're not allowed to be matir a cherem on Shabbos. Says the Rama, you are allowed to be matir a cherem on Shabbos. But not only are you allowed to be matir a cherem on Shabbos, it doesn't have to be a cherem that has anything to do with Shabbos. It could be a cherem that has to do with Choshen Mishpat. Maybe people aren't being nizar in how they conduct themselves in business, and people are being a little bit pushing pushing the envelope a little bit and maybe pocketing money that they don't really, that's really inappropriate, that they shouldn't be doing. So they make a cherem. Anybody who's not nizar is going to be put in cherem. Now, Baruch Hashem, people are being nizar. You want to be matir the cherem? You're allowed to be matir it even on Shabbos, even though it has nothing to do with tzarchei Shabbos. Why is this mutter, says the Ramah? Hoyel v'hu yom kinufya l'rabim. Because this is charmei tzibur. This is something that's negeya to the tzibur. If you want to release this cherem, you have to be able to announce it to the tzibur. Now, this is in the days before WhatsApp groups. So you can't just send out a blast and be matir the cherem. You have to get up in shul when the tzibur is there, and you have to announce that you're being matir the cherem. The time to do that is Shabbos, because that's the Yom Knufya L'Rabim. That's when everybody gets together in shul. Heavy Iske Rabim, this falls under the rubric of Iske Rabim. And we learned earlier in Sivav, Ulefakeach al Iske Rabim. You're allowed to take care of Iske Rabim on Shabbos. And we don't worry about Mimtzah Chevtzecha, Daber Dovar. So too over here. You want to be Mater and Neder, you need to do it on Shabbos, Yom Knufya L'Rabim. Therefore, it falls under the rubric of Iske Rabim, and it is mutter to Shari L'Daber Bam. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Koton Nun, back on Tzadik Tes Amid Beis, Chermei Tzibur. V'hu adin im nidu b'chaloim. This is very interesting. There's a Gemara in the Darim, Ches Amid Beis. The Gemara in the Darim says, if somebody has a dream, and in his dream he was put in cherem, he needs to be matir that cherem. Not only that, but what he has to do is he has to pull together a minyan, and they have to be matir his cherem with a minyan. Why? The Gemara explains, when somebody has a dream that he was put in cherem, we're worried that he was put in cherem b'shlichusay shel makayim. We're afraid that the Rabbeinu Shalom put him in cherem, and that's why the cherem was presented to him in a dream. Now, if the Rabbeinu Shalom put somebody in cherem, in order to be matir that cherem, you need a minyan. Why? Because when you have a minyan, shchina shruya beineim. When you have a minyan, the shchina comes. If you're worried that this cherem was done by the shchina, that in order to be matir it, you need the shchina. So you need a minyan. So the Gemara treats this very, very, very stringently. This idea that when somebody is put a cherem in a dream, it needs hatara, and it needs hatara with a minyan. So says the Mishnah Berurah, nice cut nun, v'hu adinim nidu b'chaloim. If somebody was put in nidui in a dream, matirin loy b'Shabbos, you're allowed to pull together a minyan and do the hatara on Shabbos. The tzorich Shabbosu, because this is considered a tzorich Shabbos, the loy lishtoi b'nidui. We don't want this person to remain in cherem on Shabbos, especially with such a stringent cherem. A cherem that we're worried about, that it might have been done b'shlichusay shel makayim. We got to get this nidui off him as quickly as possible. Ois Koton on Aleph. The Ramah said the reason you're allowed to be matir chermei tzibur on Shabbos is because heavy iske rabim. This is a tzibur inyan. This is something that is negeya to the tzibur. It's a public thing. So this falls under the rubric of being mefakeach al iske rabim. Says the Mishnah Berurah, mashma, the implication of this is de'imul l'tzarech yachid. Let's say this has nothing to do with the rabbim. Let's say this is not that the town pronounced a charmei tzibur and now they want to nullify the edict. It's not what it is. What's going on over here is there's an individual who's in cherem. Why is he in cherem? Imul l'tzarech yachid lahater loy ma she'ikri muhu hatzibur. Let's say the tzibur made a cherem on somebody who does a certain thing, and this person did that thing. So he was placed in cherem. So now we have a different shaila. The first shaila was the tzibur enacted a cherem. Now they want to release that inaction. They want to go ahead and they want to say that cherem, we're no longer having that edict. We're nullifying that edict. So that, the Ramah said, you're allowed to do. That's iske rabim. But now we have a different shaila. The tzibur made a cherem and somebody violated the cherem. Now that person violated the cherem, he personally is excommunicado. He personally is in cherem. He wants to be released from his cherem. So it's not that the tzibur is being matir the chermei tzibur and nullifying their edict. No, maybe the edict is remaining in place. This person who violated the chermei tzibur wants to be released from his cherem. Are you allowed to do that? The implication of the Ramah is that you can't. Because the Ramah said, why are you allowed to be matir chermei tzibur? Because that's a tzibur shazach. That's pikuach al iskei rabim. We're nullifying an edict of the tzibur. That's not what's happening over here. Over here, we're trying to service an individual. This individual violated a cherem, and he's a cherem. We want to release him from his cherem. Who says you're allowed to do that? So that's where the Mishnah Berurah is coming from. He says, mashpa, the implication of the Ramah is, if you want to service the needs of an individual, to release him from his cherem that he's in because he violated the cherem of the tzibur, the implication is that this would be aser if it's not tzarchei Shabbos. Aval, mimasha kasav bedek abayis, but from what we see written in the Sefer Bedek Abayis, b'shem Rabbeinu Yeruchim, in the name of Rabbeinu Yeruchim, v'chein mitshuvas harashba, and so too from what we see in the Tshuvas harashba, shehuva l'kaman bebeis Yosef b'simin shin mem aleph, mashba, the implication is ta'afilu tzarech yachid matirin loy, that you're even allowed to be matir an individual who was put into cherem, b'shum de'b'choy lo yuchal lekabitz hakol b'kal sheyatiru loy. Because since this person is in cherem, because he violated one of the chermei tzibur, the only way he could be released from his cherem is with a tzibur. When are you going to get a tzibur together if not on Shabbos? V'chein mitzadidim ha'achrayim l'halacha, and this is the position that the achrayim take halacha l'maisa. Kasav bebach soif siman shin zayin d'bashanoigin b'yeridim. This meaning that they have that in the marketplace, sha'ashamish kairei mitoch haksav misha muchram misham chayvoisav heavy ki'iske rabbim. They had a meaning that sometimes there would be somebody whose credit is not so good. You have a person who's been going around borrowing money and not paying back. So it's very important that the word get out. Don't lend money to this individual. He's a bad bet. You lend him money, he doesn't pay back. So what would we do? What would they do? The shamish of the tzibur would call out names of people who don't pay back their debts. When would they normally do it? By the yerid. What's the yerid? The marketplace. When it was market day and everybody came to market, the shamish would get up and the shamish would read the names of the people who have bad debts. The Bach says that this concept of calling out the people who have bad debts is considered iskei rabim, and therefore you're allowed to do it on Shabbos. So you're not going to do it at the marketplace. You're going to do it from the bima in shul on Shabbos. You're going to give a clap and call out, Pliny didn't pay back his debts, Pliny didn't pay back his debts. Even though this sounds very much like doesn't sound very appropriate to Shabbos, right? This is definitely business related. You're allowed to do it because it's iskei rabim. Why is it iskei rabim? Because if you don't do this, if you don't do this, people aren't going to be able to carry out business, right? If people have no idea who it's safe, they didn't have TRW and Experian and this and that they could run credit checks. So no one's going to be able to conduct business if there's no way to know who you could lend money to and who you can't. Now, the time that was the best to call things out for the rabbim was on Shabbos, because everybody came to shul on Shabbos. So therefore the Bach says this is considered iskei rabim, and it's mutter on Shabbos. Ve'ein koyach l'shum moira levatal zeh shenagu l'hakel lefnei kama gedolim. And he says that you can't go ahead and be machmir on this. You can't get up and say, no Rav could get up and say, no, you're not allowed to do this on Shabbos. This is something that was already established as a valid kula, and it was something that was done lefnei kama gedolim, and therefore we're not mevatel it. Okay. So what we have over here so far is like this, and one of the reasons I'm repeating this is because there's a little bit of a steer that I don't know if anybody caught, that I just have to put it out there and answer the question. What we see so far is like this. The Ramah tells us we have this concept of chermei tzibur. Chermei tzibur is an edict that the tzibur makes. Anybody who violates this rule is going to be put in cherem. Now it has arrived at the time that the tzibur wants to abolish that edict. You're allowed to abolish that edict on Shabbos. Why? Because that's considered tzarchei rabim, and the appropriate time to do it is when everyone's in shul, so you're allowed to do it on Shabbos. Now, if it was an edict that had to do with tzarchei Shabbos, if it was based on Hilchos Shabbos or it involved Hilchos Shabbos, okay, it's easier to be matir. But says the Ramah that this kula is in place even if it has nothing to do with Shabbos. The edict had nothing to do with Hilchos Shabbos, it had to do with Hilchos Choshen Mishpat. You're still allowed to abolish a chermei tzibur on Shabbos because it's called iskei rabim. Good. We saw in the Mishnah Berurah, if somebody was put in cherem in a dream, you're allowed to pull together a minyan, and you're allowed to be matir his cherem on Shabbos. Then came along the Mishnah Berurah, and the Mishnah Berurah said, okay, so what do we see so far? You're allowed to abolish chermei tzibur on Shabbos. Questioned the Mishnah Berurah, how about if somebody violated chermei tzibur, and he's in cherem, are you allowed to be matir his cherem on Shabbos? Now, don't we have the answer to that question already? We already said if somebody was put in cherem in a dream, you're allowed to be matir his cherem on Shabbos. What's the difference between being matir that person's cherem and being matir this person's cherem? You have Ruvain who was put in cherem in a dream. By him, the Mishnah Berurah said on the bottom of Tzadik Tesam Beis, Davar Pashit, no problem. You could pull together a minyan. You could be matir his cherem on Shabbos. Why? Because it's tzarchei Shabbos. Well, why is it tzarchei Shabbos? Because we can't let him remain in cherem over Shabbos. Okay. Case number 2. Shimon violated a cherem of the tzibur. He's in cherem. He wants to get out of cherem on Shabbos. Are you allowed to be matir his cherem? Questions the Mishnah Berurah. I'm not sure. From the diuk in the Ramah, it sounds like not. It sounds like you could abolish chermei tzibur on Shabbos, but that's tzarchei rabim. Over here, this is the tzarech of a yachid. I don't know. Are you allowed to be matir the cherem of a yachid on Shabbos? No. Okay. From the Bedek Abayis, from the Chuvas Rashba, it sounds like you can. Why? Because you need to pull together the tzibur, and you could only do it on Shabbos. How come the cherem in the dream wasn't such a shaila? The answer is because of the Gemara that I told you about in the Daram on Chesam Beis. You see the tremendous chaymer hadavar, the tremendous stringency that the Gemara gives to somebody who was put in cherem in a dream, that we're chayshish that he was put in cherem by the Rebbeinu Shalom. Such a person, it was a davar pashut that you could release you could be matir his cherem on Shabbos. We desperately need to get this fellow out of his cherem on Shabbos. The other person, he violated chermei tzibur, so he was put in cherem? No, let him stay in cherem until Sunday. We needed to bring down the Bedek Abayis, the Chuvas Rashba, to tell us that it is mutter. Okay, moving on. Second line down in the Ramah. All right, so we see that you're allowed to be matir chermei tzibur on Shabbos. How about the opposite? Are you allowed to enact chermei tzibur on Shabbos? Could the Rav get up at the pulpit on Shabbos and announce chermei tzibur? Anybody who violates this and this thing is going to be put in cherem. Says the Ramah, Aval ein machrimin b'Shabbos. You're not allowed to enact a cherem on Shabbos. Ki im midavar shehu l'tzarei Shabbos. Only if it's tzarchei Shabbos. If you want to enact a cherem of the tzibur to protect Shabbos, to protect Kedusha Shabbos, people are being Mechal Shabbos Chas v'Chalila. You see that people are carrying on Shabbos, they're not being Nizar, so you don't want to enact a cherem of the tzibur to protect Shabbos. That you're allowed to do on Shabbos. But any other cherem, you're not allowed to enact on Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan and Beis, Aval. However, the Magen Avram proves the din hacherem v'hatarasai shave. The Magen Avram disagrees with this Ramah. And he says the same halacha that applies to being matir a cherem applies to enacting a cherem. You're not allowed to put an individual in cherem on Shabbos Im lo yishchilul Shabbos tevikamol l'tzar Shabbos. You're only allowed to put an individual in cherem on Shabbos if it's negayat to Shabbos, if he was machal Shabbos. Or l'tzar tzibur mutter afilu eino l'tzar Shabbos. But a cherem of the tzibur, you're allowed to enact on Shabbos, even if it's not l'tzar Shabbos. So again, the Ramah said you're only allowed to enact Charmei Tzibur on Shabbos if they're l'tzar Shabbos. If they're not l'tzar Shabbos, if it's the Gei Choshe Mishpat, you're not allowed to enact Charmei Tzibur on Shabbos. Says the Magen Avram, no. You're even allowed to enact Charmei Tzibur on Shabbos, even if they're not l'tzar Shabbos. Why? Because if there's a need to enact Charmei Tzibur, says the Magen Avram, the only time to do it is on Shabbos. If you don't do it on Shabbos, when everybody's in shul, there's no other time to do it. So therefore, concludes the Magen Avram, you're allowed to be matir Charmei Tzibur on Shabbos, even if they're not negayat to Hilchah Shabbos. You're also allowed to enact Charmei Tzibur on Shabbos, even if they're not negayat to Hilchah Shabbos. Ubesefer El Yerabah B'Tzadid, the El Yerabah takes the position, the Af L'Tzorich Rabim Ein Kedai Lahachrim B'Yom HaShabbos. The El Yerabah takes the position that you should not enact Charamim on Shabbos. Why? Mishum Diksiv Bei Bracha, because Shabbos is called Bracha. And it's just inappropriate to enact Charamim on the Tzibur on Shabbos. V'ayin b'sefer Zechar L'Avram B'Hilchos Shabbos Ischesh Shehevi Mishem Knesses Agdola D'Aminik HaPoshet Hu L'Hakel. The minig is to be mekel u'kedivrei HaMagen Avram anal, and to follow the opinion of the Magen Avram that you are allowed to enact all Charmei Tzibur, even if they're not l'tzar Shabbos on Shabbos, because that's the Yom Knufya, that's when the Tzibur is gathered together in shul, so that is the time to do such things. You're allowed to put somebody in cherem on Shabbos to protect the covet of a Talmid Chacham. So if somebody was mevaze a Talmid Chacham, you're allowed to put him in cherem even on Shabbos. Okay, moving along to Sif Yud Gimel. Says the Mechaber, Lahachriz b'Shabbos al karka hanimkar. You want to make an announcement on Shabbos. Let's remember, back in the day, we didn't have title companies that did title searches. So we didn't have Riverside Title and Madison Title. We didn't have these companies that when you go to do a real estate deal, they do a title search and then make sure that there's clear title to the property and the one who's selling it is actually allowed to sell it, and therefore you can buy it and your ownership won't be disputed. We didn't have that. So what did they do? They made an announcement. When Ruvain wanted to buy a property from Shimon, they got up in shul and they made an announcement. Ruvain is buying this parcel of land from Shimon. If anybody has claims to that parcel of land and you want to get your claim looked into before the sale takes place, so get up and state your case. So they had to make this announcement. Now again, the best time to make such announcements is in shul on Shabbos, because that's when the tzibur is together. Says the Mechaber, you can't do this. Lahachriz b'Shabbos al karka nimkar, to make an announcement about real estate that's being sold. And what's the announcement? Shekol mi sheyesh lo yischus alav v'yavai v'yagid, that anybody who has a prior claim on this parcel of land should come and say so. V'im lav, and if nobody gets up now, if you don't get up now and state your case, ya'abed schusai, you're going to lose your schus. Aser, it is aser. Now, the Mishnah Berurah is going to tell us that the Mechaber is being very, very precise here. He's being very dafka. What's the announcement that the Mechaber is describing? The announcement is this exact formula that the Mechaber says. The formula is, you're getting up in shul and you're saying, Ruvain is buying parcel 127.6 from Shimon. If anybody has a claim, get up and state your case. Now, if you don't, forever hold your peace. This is your one and only opportunity. If you don't get up now and state your claim, then that's it. The property is being sold to Ruvain, and Ruvain's going to have clear ownership of it. And if you come Monday morning and you state your case Monday morning, Bezdin is going to say, go away, you had your chance. The announcement was made on Shabbos. You didn't say anything on Shabbos, you lost your chance. That announcement, says the Mechaber, you're not allowed to make on Shabbos. Now, why not? The answer is because this is the equivalent of being done as Hadin. This is considered similar to sitting in judgment, to doing a Maisa Bezdin on Shabbos. Why? Because you're actually, in a sense, taking a legal step. You are legally voiding the claim of somebody who doesn't state his claim today. That's being done as Hadin. And you could very well understand why there should be a gzeira against this, Mishum Kaisiv. This is exactly the kind of thing that would be written down in a shtar, right? It would be written down on the, today, the Yom Shabbos Kodesh, on the 17th day of this month, an announcement was made that Reuven is purchasing this parcel of land from Shimon, and an announcement was made that anyone should state their claim. Nobody stated their claim. Reuven has free and clear ownership of the parcel of land. So you could very well see why there should be such a gzeira. So if you make this announcement is also on Shabbos, because this is being done as Hadin. This is also gzeira mishum kaisiv. But what if you don't make this formula? What if the only announcement you make is, Reuven is buying parcel 127.6 from Shimon. Anybody who has a claim, please get up and state your claim. And you leave out the second half. You don't say, if you don't state your claim today, you lose your claim. You don't say that. You just make an announcement, state your claim. That, the Mishnah Berurah is going to say, would be mutter, because that's not the equivalent of being done as Hadin, and it does fall under the rubric of Tzarchei Rabim. This is like, here in the United States, it's shtuyot. There's a clause in the Constitution, the Commerce Clause, right? What's the Commerce Clause? The Commerce Clause states that Congress has the right to enact the laws that they feel are necessary for the free and easy conduction of business in the United States. People have to be able to conduct business. There are certain laws that have to be put in place in order to facilitate the smooth conducting of business. And the problem is the Congress uses the Commerce Clause to enact any kind of law that they deem fit, that they don't have the right to do under the Constitution. They find some angle where they say, oh, it falls under the Commerce Clause. But in any case, we do have a Commerce Clause, right? Which is that you're allowed to be mefakech al iskei rabim. So even though this sounds very much like mekach umemkar and masa umaton, it certainly sounds like we're conducting business in shul on Shabbos, right? But it's iskei rabim. People have to be able to purchase and sell real estate. And they didn't have title companies. So okay, so tzarchei rabim, you're allowed to be mefakech al iskei rabim. Problem is that you can't violate the gzeira against dinim. You can't violate the gzeira against being done as hadin. That you can't violate. So if you use the second half of the Mechaber's formula and you say if you don't state your claim now, you're going to lose your claim, so it's okay. It's being mefakech al iskei rabim. But if you say that, then you're being done as hadin. That you can't do. Let's see it inside in the Mishnah Berurah's Katan Nun Gimel. Lahakriz b'Shabbos. How about just to get up, give a clap, and say, I'm selling my house, there's a house available for sale. Are you allowed to do that? Says the Mishnah Berurah, in Constantinople, Noigen Heter, there were Noigen Heter, they answered this even to announce property that belongs to Hegdish, aka, we're not talking about real Hegdish, but like shuls, or tzedakos, v'yisaimim, or they belong to orphans who really you're looking out for their benefit, you're still not allowed to make such announcements on Shabbos. The second half of the Mechaber's formula was, if you don't state your claim now, you're going to lose your claim. Says the Mishnah Berurah, like we spoke out, it's only also when you follow this precise formula to have it done as hadin, because this was being done as hadin. But if you just make a plain announcement, if you have a claim on this property, please come say so. Even if the fact of the matter is that the law in this municipality is that once you make that announcement, if somebody doesn't state his claim at that time, he loses his claim. So the fact is that if somebody has a claim and he doesn't say it now, he's going to lose his claim. But that's not the announcement that you made. You didn't make that announcement. So by making the announcement, you're not violating the gzera against being done as a din. Nevertheless, says the Chavetz Chaim, certainly this is not lechatchila, deviki dibur dechayil, because this very much is dibur dechayil. But if in certain places they do follow this halacha, you cannot object. Because there is a valid concern to say that this is tzarchei rabim. Actually, inyan masmiya, even though he brings down from the Rivash, who says, this is like a tumua. It's too much of a wonder. It's too astonishing that people should get up in shul on Shabbos Parabima and make these kind of announcements about purchases and sales and announcing claims. So, lechatchila, we certainly don't like it. Okay, one more halacha here. Bottom line, Kuf Amud Aleph, says the Rama. Hago. Interesting halacha. V'chein osir lahachriz yayin b'Shabbos. You're not allowed to announce on Shabbos wine for sale. Anybody want to buy a nice Chardonnay? I have 2 cases of Chardonnay available. You're not allowed to make such an announcement. Why? Chiddush Neira. Because it's conducting business on Shabbos. Now you look at this and you say, well, excuse me, what exactly was the Makam Lahat there? What was the Havamina that this should be mutter? Right? Well, let's see the Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah says, Ois Katan and Hey, Lahachriz Yayin. Hainu, this means Lahidia Sheyesh Eitzel Ploini Uploini Yayin Limkar. What the Ramah is saying you're not allowed to do is to get up and make an announcement that Ruvain has 17 cases of Chardonnay for sale. The cost of a Magen Avram, and here's where you have why you would have thought it was a mutter. The cost of a Magen Avram, the Magen Avram writes that there is a case where it is mutter. Dafka b'makom sheshchiach yayin tuva. This is only usher, in Lakewood where you have 4 locations of the Vineyard, or in Brooklyn where you have liquor stores, kosher liquor stores all over the place. Baruch Hashem, we don't know what it means not to have wine to Kiddush. There's wine available all over the place. So then, you're not allowed to announce that you have wine for sale because it's mamish mekach memkar. But in a place where it's not easy to find wine, have achraza yayin tzarich mitzvah b'shel Kiddush. Now there's an angle of tzarchei mitzvah. People don't know where to get wine. They're in shul Friday night. Somebody wants to make an announcement. Anybody who needs wine, Ruvain has wine. What do you mean? That's tzarchei mitzvah. I need yayin l'kiddush. Now you're going to have to figure out how to take ownership of the wine, right? You're not allowed to transfer ownership on Shabbos, how to arrange for the payment, etc., etc. Fine, but you could understand now why it would be tzarchei mitzvah to announce that there's wine available. But you're certainly not allowed to announce prices. Like the Ramah told us earlier, that even when it's mutter, let's say to go ahead and talk to a malamed about possibly hiring him to teach Torah to your son, right? You're not allowed to talk price. You're not allowed to talk salary. Here too, you can't talk the price of the wine. For Rashal Kosav, the Marshal writes that in a case where you do have to make this announcement in Shul Friday night, the Yachrim is Kaidim Baruch Hu. You should make the announcement before Baruch Hu. What's the Marshal saying? So we spoke about this already earlier, way in the beginning of Chelik Gimel. The minig was that they davened early Friday night. So they were davening Ma'ariv before Shabbos really started. So Baruch Hu was considered Kabbalah Shabbos. So says the Marshal, if you find yourself in a position where you do have to make announcements about who has wine available for sale, do it before Baruch Hu, so the Olam wasn't Makabel Shabbos yet. If you forgot and you didn't make the announcement until after Baruch Hu, so okay, it's Tzarchei Mitzvah, you could make the announcement. But lo yaskis chomekach, but do not announce the price of the wine. Thank you so much for joining me for Limanat Torah, discussive Limanat Torah, Shemi Megan, Agans Klai, for all the Rebbeinu Shem should send, Yeshuas, Refuas, Parnasa, Sheduchim, to all those in need. We should be zeichet to see the Bias Kal Tzedek, B'mherav Yameinu, Amen. Be well.